Hey, it's Minute Book Reports, and I just finished reading chapters 13 to the end of the book Artemis by Andy Weir, and I really enjoyed this book. In this video, I want to talk about the economics of what was shared in this book and how it relates to YouTube. I know economics can be this huge, big thing, but I feel like as I was reading it, especially towards the end, there's this discussion on economics as a living organic thing, and how that ties in to YouTube content and YouTube content creators. But first, there's economics, which again, I have no personal interest in, but the story got me more and more interested in the economics because the story changes over the course of the book. It becomes very small. The plot is very small, where it's mostly about Jazz and she wants money, which to some extent is sort of economics. But it starts to grow as we talk about someone wanting to take over a certain industry in that area with the aluminum factory, and then it sort of grows again as we learn more and more about the Zaffo product and the shift moving away from tourism to exporting the Zaffo cables, which can be used then on Earth. And sort of as the story escalates and what Jazz sort of has to face and the challenges that she has to overcome, the expansion of economy and how that plays an important role in the story becomes bigger and bigger, and I like that. You know, that's something very, very subtle that maybe people don't care about, but when you're reading science fiction, I feel like it's important to understand not just what's happening on a micro level, but also what's happening on sort of a story-wide level, a universe level, or just something on a bigger scale. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that the author has these double sort of storylines going across. And I mean, I'm sure there's multiple storylines going across, but I felt like as I was reading this story, it was not just about Jazz, but it was also about economics and how it moves from sort of personal economics, personal finance, to sort of, in a way, it moves into a more global, or I guess you can say an interglobal economy. I don't know exactly the word is between moon and Earth and how that would incorporate, but the economy, which would include global economy of the Earth and also the economy of the moon, of Artemis. Noguchi explains at the end to Jazz how economies work, and I really like this explanation. Again, I don't know if this is economic theory or where this comes from. Maybe this is just made up, but I thought it was brilliant when I first heard about it. She explained all the stages of an economy, and she likened it to a person where it has a life, and then from there, eventually it'll die, and then it will birth other economies, and those will grow up and get bigger, and then they'll die. And I just love that idea of an economy being this living and changing and moving thing. And it could seem very obvious, you know, when you look at that you have sort of these institutions, these sort of social structures that we have, and of course it's very easy to call them organic. But the way that it's sort of explained in this book, it makes it easier for me to understand, because when you talk about the economy, it looks very much like a numbers thing, but it's hard to forget that those numbers are driven by people. You know, they're driven on people's behavior in what they purchase, in what they hear in the news, and what they're feeling, and that sort of makes this shift in the economy. And I forget that, because when I think about the economy, I'm thinking about stocks, I'm thinking about, you know, cost of living, I'm thinking about all these different types of things, but a lot of it is number based, but it's really very much behavioral based, and the people behind those behaviors, they have minds that they make choices, and it's hard to remember that when you're talking about economics, and at least from the perspective of a person who really has no vested interest in economics. So I really like the fact that the economy is viewed as this organic living thing. Noguchi breaks it down into several stages, and I just want to talk about what my view is on each of those stages, because I thought it was so interesting. The first is lawless capitalism until it impedes on growth. And I love that, because I feel like when an industry is emerging, when an economy is building, it's sort of just it's like this wild plant that just sort of just boom, it's just like a weed, it just starts to grow and grow and grow and grow, and it becomes this thing where we see it everywhere. And maybe if economy is not your thing, you know, like we're talking about like the tech, you know, business, or right now it seems to be very much the online businesses that are sort of booming right now. And in a way, it's almost like entrepreneurs are also in this sort of booming phase where everyone's sort of wanting to become their own entrepreneur. But I think this also works on a much smaller scale, on particularly when it comes to like things like YouTube, right? Where you talk about emerging lawless capitalism, and what becomes popular, like what becomes profitable as a YouTube channel, what, in terms of the videos that are produced, the subject matter. And you can definitely see this in the life of YouTube. You talk about what was popular way back in the day. You saw this emerging gaming culture, beauty culture, where these things just exploded on YouTube. And then now in recent years, you've seen this big immersion of sort of vlogging and the personal life. And you also see, bigger businesses and corporations getting involved in YouTube, putting their stuff on YouTube and monetizing it, and that being a way to distribute their content. And so you're seeing that it's sort of becoming this thing where it's still emerging, and then you see now where it starts to impede on growth. And it's not a growth based on numbers, because YouTube is huge. It's a growth based on the, I think, advertiser side of it, where now the advertisers are seeing that this thing is gigantic, right? This thing is growing out of control. But how do they get the most out of what they're paying for? And I think that's the part where YouTube is stepping in to then sort of saying, okay, now it's starting to impede on the growth of our advertisers, on the growth on advertiser dollars and what they're getting out of it. It's not so much that there's going to be more and more revenue from ads being thrown at YouTube, but I think the efficiency and the appropriateness, maybe it's time to sort of reel that back in. And we're sort of seeing this on the sort of local economics of YouTube, and I find that very interesting. So according to Noguchi, the next stage of the economy would be regulation, enforcement, and taxes. And you can see that if you want to talk about this on a more YouTube level, they're starting to regulate things. They have these rules now. They're starting to enforce some of those rules. And we're not yet quite at that taxes part, because the taxes part has always been a part of YouTube monetization. But it is something that I wouldn't be surprised if we see. I mean, I know we see it with things like YouTube Red, but I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube introduces this sort of tax system where through fees, you're able to either access, as a content creator, you're able to access certain things, certain features, or it's a fee that would further sort of protect them as the seller of ads to get like the more serious, the more polished content creators to be on this platform. One of the things that I remember talking to my brother about a while ago was I remember I said, I know YouTube is free. Anyone can post whatever they want. And it's that, and I think YouTube will always be that platform. But what happens if one day they decide that in order to be a content creator, you have to pay a fee to upload, to monetize, but to upload a certain amount of video? So I thought, well, that would make sense that you would pay for that service, because frankly, they're doing it for free, and you're splitting that ad revenue with YouTube. But it would also further create barriers for people to want to upload and monetize. And again, in the sort of the system that we were talking it out, YouTube would still be available for everyone to post videos on for free. But in order to monetize those videos, you would reach a certain free cap. Like maybe you could only post 3 videos a week, or maybe 2 videos a week for free, monetized. After that, if you wanted to further monetize those videos, you'd have to pay YouTube like a $5 a month fee, which could then, I guess that's YouTube Red, right? You would have to be like a YouTube Red partner or something like that. And then that would allow you to upload more content that would be monetized. So that was just my thought, because I thought, I was just thinking to myself, this YouTube thing is not sustainable on their end. They really struggle, I think, to upkeep this service that it is making money, but it's hard to regulate. It's a lot of work for them, and I guess at what point are they gonna decide, maybe this is not this is too much, or it's too much to regulate in terms of the monetized stuff. How can we further make it easier for ourselves? Oh, we can include a paywall to further sort of separate and sort of sift out the serious creators from the ones who are either sneaking in the system, or maybe they're not as serious, but they're still taking up bandwidth, they're still taking up server space, all this stuff. And so I don't know, it was just something that I had thought about previously, and when she explained this sort of the stages of the economy, I thought, wow, this works on a level similar to YouTube. The next stage, according to Noguchi, is public benefit and entitlement. Public benefit is basically where the government would assist those who couldn't make it in the economy with certain programs. So on a federal level, we have things like, TANF, we have like food stamps, EBT, we have Medicaid, Medicare, those types of things, free healthcare, assistance for unemployment. We have all these different programs on a federal level, even on a local level, we have those types of things. But maybe one day there's going to be an option where YouTube will go out of their way to help smaller YouTube content creators, or at the same time they'll go ahead and push the creators that are doing well. And maybe we're past that point. I'm not sure. Maybe in my sort of naive sense of where YouTube is headed and that culture as a content creator, maybe we've passed that point where they've already done the rules and regulations and they're just continuously updating these rules and regulations. And we are at that point where they've already passed public benefit, and they've passed sort of this entitlement stage where they're continuing to promote the top creators, and the bottom creators, they're trying to help them with some tools and some things, but really it's never really going to help them escape that level. And so maybe we've passed that point, and we're actually at the last stage of economics. And the last stage of economics would be over expenditure and collapse. And I think this is worrisome. This is very much the point where an economy is very much creating this gap, this huge gap between those who have and those who have not. And of course, the ones who have are going to be a very small population versus the ones who don't have, which is going to be a growing and a bigger number of people. Eventually, that economy cannot support all of the lower class people, while also keeping the upper class people, the wealthy, happy, and then it just collapses, and then it breaks into small economies, and then they all tend to grow, and the same thing happens again. I don't know how this is going to happen on a YouTube scale. Again, maybe it's already happened where people feel discouraged. They're not going to want to produce content. But I feel like as long as they have that like ideal lifestyle, as long as YouTube and producing content, it'll always have that carrot dangling in front of people, like you can make it big, you can become famous, you can become successful. As long as they have that, I think you're always going to have a class system within YouTube content creators of you're going to have the people just starting out and they're just stuck at like 10 subscribers, or they're just not getting any traction, but then you're gonna have people that are sort of building their way up. They're gonna have this huge middle class, and then you'll have the top people that are making millions, and maybe that's just how all economies work. But what's dangerous is that it's gonna break down, and obviously YouTube hasn't reached that point of total collapse, but it's something of a word of caution. And this is not an monetization thing. This has nothing to do with the policies of what they're saying. But I just wanted to point out that when the character in this story talks about economies, I think that works on many different levels. And the most relevant and most interesting to me is the economy of YouTube and how that's working, and what we can learn, and where are we in these stages. Again, I'm not an economics major. I don't know if this theory of economics is real, but I'm just going based on what was read or sort of shared in the book. But if it is real and if it is true, then it's important to identify where we are on this scale. And it must be that we are in that final stage of over expenditure, where it's becoming very stressed out to the point from the perspective of YouTube, producing all this stuff. It's getting stressed out more, and then the following thing would be the collapse, and then from there would emerge smaller sort of sub-economies, and then those would grow. So it's very interesting to see where we are in this economy, because I feel like you can follow all the different steps from lawless capitalism all the way to the end. You know, and maybe for some people, they think they're in a certain phase, and I think that's very dangerous when you think you're in the wrong economic sort of season. And as part of the economic cycle, if you think you're in the wrong one, but we're actually in a different one, then your behavior is going to match that of the past sort of season. But everyone else is sort of way ahead of you. They're operating on a different season, and that becomes very difficult. Lastly, I just want to say that I really enjoyed this book. I hope it becomes a film. I hope it becomes a movie, because the main character, I feel, is very empowering. You know, she is an ethnic minority female in a space world. She's pretty young, and some of her moral choices are questionable, but she has a good heart, and that's what we like. You know, there's obviously going to be a lot of nice visual effects if this can become a film, because of the gravity, because of the moon itself. But I really hope that it becomes a movie, because it will, I think, encourage, you know, young women maybe to get into some of these fields of science, you know, where she is very intelligent. She can thrive in any field that she chooses. I mean, she's a porter by her trade is to, you know, deliver packages, but she's an entrepreneur. She is very smart when it comes to mathematics and science, and if she doesn't know anything like chemistry, she can learn and she can understand, and that's good. That's a good role model, and it's not one who is all about men and her identity. It's also one who doesn't shun away from all of that either. It's just she is a very independent person who is smart, intelligent, I assume very beautiful and attractive. But I feel like that's a really good role model who has a good heart, who fixes her relationship with her dad, who fixes relationships with some of her friends, and finds that she values them. You know, even though she is independent, she values them and she works together with them and reconciles those relationships. So I hope you have the opportunity to read Artemis. It's a great book that talks about a lot of different things. It has a female protagonist, but it gets into some of these other things that I never thought would appear in a science fiction book. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.